All right, my apologies to the Creedence Clearwater Revival fans, but the Clearwater is what we're actually here to talk about. I've got Tofino Mayor Perry Schmunk sitting in the chair next to me. And, well, first of all, thanks for taking time out of what must be a busy day.
Morning, Jeff. Yeah, thanks to be here.
I'm sure you were going to go do some really hard Tofino work and go do some fishing or something today.
Yeah, just to me, it was a regular day.
But thanks for coming down. I know there's been some confusion lately, even up to 2-3 weeks ago, about what was happening with the water supply when we had that boil water advisory kind of come through the different regions. I don't know if people understand that there's sort of two separate water systems and how different parts of Tofino were affected. And then now there was a recent press release that was misinterpreted by some media in some ways that caused a bit of confusion. So let's start with kind of what the situation was when we had the first boil water advisory and how it's changed or developed or what's happening.
Okay, yeah, sounds great. So to start with, just back in and about January 4th, we had that significant rain event in town, which was almost a record breaker. There was only one other day.
Yeah, like 82 or something.
Yeah, 82 in February that had more rain in a 12-hour period. So that rain event created some turbidity in our water.
Turbidity. So
clarity. The in
sediment.
Exactly.
Stuff like that.
Instead of seeing crystal clear water come out of your tap, some turbidity came. And when that happened, and there's alarms on the system whenever turbidity comes up, so the alarms go off. We're alerted that there's turbidity in the system, and then we follow the steps, and we as the district walk through those steps with VHA, who regulates our water, and they say what to do. And maybe it's also worth to note that turbidity in and of itself is not a health hazard. Yeah. It's just unclarity in the water. The one thing that is a concern and why there's regulations in place is when there's turbidity in the water treatments impact is diminished. Mm-hmm. So there is a risk. And just so everybody knows as well, our water has been tested for other things like E. coli and so on, and they've always come back completely clean. Yeah. So there's never been a health risk. But when the turbidity happens,
an increased chance of risk.
So there's some real serious history in our country about water issues. So that's why these regulations are in place. The turbidity happens, we had to respond to it and go to the boil water advisory, which we did. So that event happens, comes and goes as the event subsides. Our water goes clear again. Eventually, we remove the boil water advisory, and everything's fine. Then we have a relatively, for Tofino, I'm not exactly sure the date, but we have a relatively minor water rain event a couple weeks later, and what should have been absorbed by the system did spike our turbidity again. Had to happen again. Yeah. And at that point in time, it required a lot closer inspection, which was done. Our water comes from Mears Island from it's collected from 3 different sources. Yeah. There was some work done by the district staff that isolated where the turbidity was coming from, and that was coming out of the Closed Creek infiltration gallery. And it also, at that point in time, we got the expert help, if you will, of an engineer that's got the qualifications to deal with it, and B, has a very long history with the Tofino water system. Yeah. And we enlist his help, and he does some further detailed work on seeing what actually is the problem. Yeah. And actually, I'll go back a step. One thing that people should realize, if they don't realize in Tofino, is our water is collected. It is surface water that's collected and then piped under the sound and into the town. So it is susceptible to this sort of thing. We do not draw our water from wells. Yeah. So in this case, we get to the help from the engineer. At that point in time, so actually I should also back up. At that point in time, Closed Creek when we've isolated the problem, it was turned off. It was no longer feeding the system. But and then the engineer comes on site and for everybody's comfort, we can measure turbidity on both sides, at the source over on Mears Island and here in the town. And the other side of it, throughout the town on a regular basis, every day the water's tested. Yeah. So when the turbidity became a non-issue at the source at Closed Creek, it was turned back on. Yeah. And everything was fine. But knowing what we now knew with the rain event that we're currently in that started 24 hours ago, as a precautionary event, just to make sure, we closed off Closed Creek so it did not feed the system. All right. And sure enough, and we, this is really fresh information. District staff have been back and forth, and yes, the turbidity did go up
at the source.
At the source. At Closed Creek.
But Closed Creek was not attached to the drinking water system.
It's not attached to the drinking water system, and as long as the turbidity at the source is an issue, we can isolate it, and it will not feed into the system.
So this turbidity, I guess, is caused by mudslides or some sort of disturbance, erosion, something causing the extra sediment to exist.
Yeah, a couple.
On the mountainside.
There are a couple of different theories. Both might have some validity. There's some concern that there is a slide in and around the infiltration gallery that might have some validity. But the other side of it too is upon the engineer's work and how that water is collected. There, to make it very, some maintenance needs to be done. Very little has been done in the last literally 25 years of how that water is collected, and I want to say it's a relatively sophisticated but kind of common approach to water filtration, where it's a series of big rocks, smaller rocks, and so on. And some of those natural processes have been clogged up. Yeah. So even just as of yesterday, we have the engineers' recommendations going forward of what the best case scenario is to reduce the amount or the incidence of turbidity that would come from Close Creek. Maybe one of the unfortunate things about it is that doesn't mean that we can do any of this required work in any short term. And when I say short term, the next month or two, because as long as it's rainy, very significantly, we risk disturbing more. So we do have a recommendation on what to do to clear it up, so that these filtration processes work better in the future.
So is there potential then for this to be an issue come summertime, if that reservoir either has to be taken offline because they're working on it, or because it might have some sort of risk of turbidity that we might end up with another water issue this summer?
No, I'm not concerned about it, because one, we've isolated the problem. We know what it is. We know how to fix it, and we can. I will be very transparent in the short issue. When the turbidity drops down at the source, we will turn it back on, and continue to have it feed the system. But we'll monitor it and act accordingly. And the second thing is we'll get the work done so that we have the volumes throughout the summer.
Yeah. So it's not a lengthy process. It's going to take 4 months to do. It's just something you need that period of when you know you're not going to get the rain.
And to quote the engineer, I think his exact quote is, "It's a practical man's it's not
elaborate, or
it's not elaborate. We are proceeding carefully with the engineer's recommendations, but it is something that we can manage and fix and so on. And I'm anticipating the work being done well in advance of any issues."
Sweet. Yeah. Well, that's good to have that information. Is there anything else you wanted to share about the
situation? The key thing is, we, speaking myself, the council, the district staff, we'll just everyone know that we will put up updates on our website as regularly as possible as the situation changes, and if people have any questions, to contact either myself or the district office, and we'd be happy to explain what's going on. And maybe just the last thing, I appreciate everybody's concern. We've got a history in this town, but I believe we're on top of the situation and don't anticipate any problems going forward.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. I'm sure you got a lot of work to do today. You're a busy man.
Thanks, Jeff.
Mayor Perry Schmunk filling us in a little bit about what's going on with the water in Tofino. I'm going to fill you in on what's going on in the